So, once upon a time, which is always the best way to be in any story, I always think, there were 3 sailors. Beautiful, gorgeous, handsome sailors, obviously. And they made a vow that they would stay with each other as companions, always aboard ship, until the end of their days. But times were hard. I mean, there was no wars going on for a start, and that's a terrible time to be a sailor when there's no wars. I mean, a war guarantees that you're going to be in business. But due to economic cutbacks and financial ruin of the country, eventually they thought that they'd have to part their ways. Brothers, we're gonna have to part our ways. Maybe we can meet up somewhere.
Sounds like a plan. If we make our fortunes somehow, perhaps.
Yes, maybe. Oh, I don't know. What are we going to do? We'll never be able to stay together. It was then, of course, as always in these things, that a clatter of hooves could be heard. A clatter of hooves as a great black stallion rode around a bend in the road, and there behind the stallion was a great black cart. And there from the cart stepped a finely and dapper dressed gentleman. Oh, you 3 look like you're, I don't know where my accent's going. You 3 look like you're, in need of a little help.
You sounded or Italian, I can't tell. Yes, well, actually, we are desperately in need of help. How convenient that you came along.
Well, I like to keep abreast of situations. It was then, of course, that they looked and noticed that there upon the stranger's head, the dapper-dressed gentleman's head, were tiny nubs of horns. Not only that, there was a smell about him. A smell of gunpowder, brimstone, in fact, a distinctly sulphurous smell, and instead of where his boots were, he had cloven hooves.
Wait a minute. You're not
The devil?
Why do you think I have this accent?
The devil is French.
The devil is French, of course, but I'll not stay in this accent anymore as it meanders around like a wandering thing. Yes, well, I can see that you wish to become separated, and well, not to become separated, but maybe I can make a deal. Maybe I can make a deal where you'll stay rich for your entire lives, where in fact, every time you reach into your pockets, you'll be able to pull out pieces of 8 and doubloons.
Really?
Maybe we can make a deal. A deal with me.
Yeah, deal with the devil. That sounds like a great plan, right?
That could never
Right?
Yeah.
Never go wrong, can it?
No!
Not really.
Oh, wait a minute. We don't lose our
Souls!
do we?
No, luckily you'll discover that I'm not actually interested in your souls. I mean, what value are your souls? I'm interested in some other souls. Some other souls that are already part way to my realm.
Oh, well, when you put it like that, I mean, we'd just be helping them where they're going anyway, so it's
Well,
not
of course
really
it's
immoral
like-
at all, is it?
Your souls would be in no peril at all. The deal is this. You will always be rich when you reach into your pockets, but you are not allowed to utter any words except these. One of you can say,
All 3 of us.
one can say,
For money.
and one can say, quite right too. And if any other words pass your lips between now and the end of the deal, then I'll have your souls, and you will become poor men. But if you hold up the deal, I mean, it's not like I break deals. Hell's full of lawyers. I can't get out of these things. If you stick with the deal, you'll be rich men for the rest of your lives. Do we have a deal? Sorry about the steam coming off that. And that was it. The deal was done. And the devil got back in his chariot and with a flourish disappeared round the bend in the road. And the 3 sailors went upon their way.
And as they went on, they conversed amongst themselves as they always did when they travelled together. They said,
All 3 of us.
for money!
Quite right too.
For money!
Quite right too.
All 3 of us.
For money!
Quite right too.
All 3 of us.
And on it went. Until eventually, everyone that they passed was avoiding them because they were clearly mad. And they arrived at an inn and their stomachs were beginning to rumble. In fact, they were beginning to feel quite hungry, and one of them said,
All 3 of us.
Oh, quite right too.
for money. So in they went to the inn, and the innkeeper said, hello, He was a baldy, jolly sort of man, like him. All innkeepers are baldy and jolly. Hello, I expect you'd be wanting some food and a room.
All three of us!
Yes, okay. For money? Well, yes, of course for money. That's the way these things work.
Quite right too.
Indeed it is right, for I have to make my living. And so it was settled. They had some food and they had some rooms, but the innkeeper thought the trio were quite peculiar because they kept saying,
All three of us!
for money?
Quite right too.
And that's all they'd ever say. Even if the locals came and said, hey, who's that over there? What are you doing sitting in my seat?
All three of us!
For money!
Quite right too.
So they were badly beaten.
Oh, all three of us for money. Quite right too.
And in the end, the innkeeper didn't want to give them a room because he thought they'd mess the sheets or something other unpleasant like that. So they were forced to sleep by the fire, shivering.
All three of us!
For money!
Quite right too.
Now it so happened that a rich merchant came into the inn as well with a huge chest filled with valuables, and they knew it was filled with valuables because he went up to the innkeeper and said, excuse me, I'm an extremely rich merchant and I have this chest full of valuables. I'd like a room and I'd like you to keep this safe. Yes, said the innkeeper, I will. But that night, the innkeeper made a plan with his wife to murder the merchant. And they whispered in hushed voices when everyone had left the tavern and the fire had burnt low to embers. And he said, wife, you go get that treasure chest. And then we'll go up and we'll cut the merchant's throat. Now, three sailors, they heard this. They whispered, three of us. They kept quiet until they heard a horrible noise from upstairs that sounded a bit like "Jump!" and so on. And in the morning, the innkeeper rushed upstairs and then rushed downstairs and then rushed out into the street and cried, "Oh my God, there's been a murder!" in an incredibly convincing voice. It must be those weirdos!
All three of us!
For money?
Quite right too.
Of course, all the locals, not trusting foreigners who weren't from these parts, immediately had them arrested. And they were thrown in jail despite all their protestations of,
All three of us!
for money!
Quite right too! Now, they were locked in the darkest dungeon, in the deepest prison within the town. And the next day, they were hauled into a forbidding courtroom in chains, and they were dragged before the judge. Said the judge. Jowly fellow. You people are monsters! He said, criminals who have defiled the peace of our community with your murdering ways. No, you have spoken no sensible word to the officers who have arrested you. So now, will you tell me which of you murdered the merchant? And of course the first man said, all three of us! Why? Why would you commit such a hideous crime? Said the judge.
For money!
Oh, well, in that case, said the judge, I have no option. And he placed a black cap upon his head. But to sentence you to be taken from this place to a place of execution where you are all to be hanged by your necks until you are not just dead, but dead, dead, dead! Quite right too! Indeed it is right! Said the judge. Officers of the law, take them away and execute their sentence! And at that, the guards dragged them away! And they were hauled through the streets. A great crowd had gathered to see the execution. Back in those days, remember, there was nothing to do on a weekend. Something like this going on. So the public execution was the best method of family entertainment. Hey, everyone would take their kids down to watch people be hanged, and they would sell a few pies and a few drinks. Oh, and everyone had a jolly day out, except the people being hanged, of course, who generally had a less pleasant time of it. But the 3 sailors were dragged into the centre of town, and there they saw the forbidding sight of the gallows. Oh, all 3 of us! But they held to their bargain and said nothing more than those words. And as they were dragged into the centre of the town, they began slowly, to the sound of the drums, to mount the steps to the gallows, and they saw there the hangman in his black mask, the ropes, 3 of them, hanging low with their nooses, ready to stretch their necks and make them dance a hempen jig. They dreaded, and the judge came before them with the hangman and the priest, who was praying. "Now I implore you," said the priest, "please, repent your sins and confess your crimes. Have you nothing to say before you are executed?" "All 3 of us," said one. "Yes, that would be good," said the priest, "if all 3 of you could say something."
For money?
"Yes, we're aware of why you committed your hideous crime. Have you nothing else to say?"
Quite right, too.
"Indeed, then I can say no more than that it is quite right that you are all hanged, and may God have mercy on your souls."
For money?
Quite right, too.
"No! God admits of no such bribery. You will surely fare to hell. All 3 of us?" "I'm afraid so." And so the ropes were placed around their necks. Their eyes were blindfolded, and they trembled on the edge of infinity. So he gets the magnitude of this situation. On the edge of infinity, when just then they heard the sound of clattering hooves racing through the street. "Wait," everyone cried, "wait! It could be a pardon!" And a fine gentleman was riding upon the horse. "Hello, fine gentleman," said everyone.
Hello.
Weren't you French before?
Maybe. Well, pardon, grant mercy to these gentlemen. They are not the perpetrators of this foul act. I think you'll find that it was the innkeeper, and I can prove such a thing, as he's not a man who's only committed one crime, him and his wife, but have committed many crimes. Go into their cellar and see what you can find there.
And now, the soldiers of the town obeyed the rich gentleman, because everyone obeys someone if they've got a fancy enough hat. And they went down into the cellar of the rich of the innkeeper, and they found not just the body of the rich merchant, but the body of many other rich merchants too, and many other treasures, gold and silver and jewels that he had stolen from them. And the men turned to the devil, the sailors. "All 3 of us?"
Money?
Quite right, too. Gentlemen, I think you'll find that now our bargain is done. Your souls, as I said, I was not interested in, but your pockets will still always be filled with coins. The souls that I wished, of course, was the innkeeper and his wife, for there's nothing quite like a man who peddles beer and peddles murder. We're down in hell, for we like them even more than we like politicians. Enjoy your lives, gentlemen.
And so the sailors merry made their way. And don't worry, gentles all, everybody's day out was not spoiled. The gallows that they had built at such great cost did not go to waste. For the innkeeper and his wife were hauled up, and in those days they decided not to bother with all of the faff and expense of a trial with evidence and judges. And they stretched their necks until they were not just dead, but dead, dead, dead. And the sailors, I'm happy to report, lived happily ever after.
All 3 of them.
For money.
All right, too.
Yay!